In the spring of 2026, a cruise ship sat anchored off the coast of Cape Verde, alone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and not a single country on Earth would let it dock. On board were about 150 people just back from Antarctica. 3 of them were already dead. The rest were quarantined at sea, while the World Health Organization scrambled to figure out what was killing them. The answer was a rare virus. And in an instant, a floating 5-star vacation became a ghost ship no port would touch. Now hold that picture in your head. A small town, full of paying customers, stranded in international waters because of one invisible passenger. Because that is the business you're about to buy. Okay, so you want to buy a cruise line. How hard could it be? You buy a couple of enormous ships, you fill them with happy tourists, you sail in slow circles around the Caribbean, and you collect money while everyone else sips cocktails by the pool. But here's the strange part. The ticket you sell them, the cruise itself, is priced so low that the cruise line often loses money on it. The fare barely covers the journey. Sometimes it doesn't cover it at all. So how is this one of the most reliable money machines in all of travel? And at the same time, a business that can be wiped out overnight by a single virus, a single rock, or a single headline. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how the trick works, how a cruise line actually makes its money, and it is not where you think. Why owning the biggest, most beautiful ship on the planet still isn't enough to keep you out of bankruptcy, and why a cruise ship isn't really a ship at all. Let's start the way you'd start buying anything expensive, with the price list. At the bottom end, you can pick up an older, smaller ship for a few $100 million. Cheap, by the standards of this insane industry. Step up to a brand new mid-sized ship, and you're now in serious money. Norwegian paid around $850 million for the Norwegian Prima. Celebrity spent about $900 million on the Celebrity Beyond. Carnival Celebration came in near $1 billion. And then there's the top of the menu, the Floating City. Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas cost roughly $2 billion to build, the most expensive cruise ship ever made, and the largest vessel on the ocean at nearly 250,000 tons, 20 decks, 2,800 staterooms, over 7,500 people at full capacity, served by 2,300 crew, 7 swimming pools, and the tallest water slide ever built on a ship. Its sister, the Star of the Seas, ties it for the most expensive ever. This is not a boat. It's a small town that has to turn a profit every single week. But here's the first catch nobody warns you about. You can't just walk onto a lot and drive one of these home. Only a handful of shipyards on the entire planet can even build a mega ship, and the wait is years. Icon of the Seas took more than 7 years to go from the first sketch to its first voyage. Think about that. You're committing $2 billion to a guess, a bet on what tourists will want half a decade from now. And the Ocean Tada has a way of making bets like that go wrong. Okay, that's the cost. Now for the question that actually matters, where does the money come from? And here's the part that breaks people's brains. The ticket isn't the business. Across the big cruise lines, the fare you pay to get on the ship is only about 2/3 of their revenue. And on the cheap sailings, it barely breaks even. The real money is the other third, the onboard spending. And that smaller slice, the drinks, the casino, the photos, the excursions, is where almost all of the profit lives. The cheap cruise fare isn't the product, it's the bait. So how do you turn bait into billions? Simple. You take a few thousand people and you put them somewhere they cannot leave. The second that gangway comes up, there is no other restaurant, no other bar, no other store, no other casino, no other anything. There is only you. Specialty dining, premium Wi-Fi, spa treatments, art auctions, shore tours, a soda, a cocktail, all sold to people floating in the middle of the sea with nowhere else on earth to spend a dollar. The numbers are beautiful. On a single 7-day cruise, the average passenger spends about $1,000 on the ticket, and another $650 once they're on board. After all the costs, the line keeps roughly $300 of pure profit per passenger, per cruise. Now multiply that by 5,000 beds. 52 weeks a year. The ocean isn't the product. The captive audience is, and just like a casino, every inch of the ship is engineered to keep you spending. You been on a cruise or seen one? Notice anything? The whole layout is a funnel, and the schedule is the cleverest part of all. Watch what happens in port. The ship docks for only about 8 hours, just long enough to sell you the cruise line's own shore excursion. And the moment you're back on board, the ship pulls out into international waters and does one thing immediately. It opens the casino. No clocks, no exits. A floating mall with a captive crowd and an entire evening at sea with nothing to do but spend. The industry even has a name for the goal. They call it share of wallet, which is why cruise lines will do something that sounds insane. They'll practically give the cabins away. The costs of running the ship are fixed, whether it sails full or empty. So the lines pack every ship to 105, 110% of capacity, dumping cabins at fire sale rates to do it. Because an empty cabin earns nothing. But a discounted passenger, they still gamble, they still drink, they still book the excursion. The ticket is bait, and the body in the cabin is the asset. Now here's a secret almost every passenger sails right past. Look at the back of the ship. Your big American cruise line isn't American. Hardly any major cruise ship flies a US flag. Over 200 are registered in the Bahamas, others in Panama or Malta. And this isn't new. It started back in 1922, when American ships reflagged to Panama just so they could keep serving alcohol during Prohibition. The booze came back. The ships never did. Today, that foreign flag lets the cruise line skip US federal income tax, sidestep American wage and labor laws, and limit your right to sue them, cutting their operating costs by an estimated 12 to 27%. Your dream vacation becomes a foreign country the moment it leaves the dock. And that fat profit margin, it's quietly subsidized by the people you never see. Under those flags of convenience, the crew is hired largely from lower wage countries. They work weeks on end with little time off, often under far weaker protections than they'd ever get on a ship flying a US or European flag. A floating 5-star resort, running on a workforce that most passengers never think about, 2 decks below their feet. So far, this sounds like the perfect business. Guaranteed crowds, captive spending, no taxes. So why on earth do cruise owners ever lose money? The short answer is everything else. Even a completely sold-out ship is a money furnace. Payroll, fuel, tons of food every single day. Massive commissions to travel agents. Port fees and taxes in every harbor. And here's the killer line item. About 1 out of every $8 of expenses goes just to paying off the debt you borrowed to buy the ship in the first place. The captive audience gives you a guaranteed top line. But everything underneath it, that's a fistfight. And that fistfight is where the empires fall. Because here's the part the brochures leave out. Your $2 billion asset can do something a hotel can never do. It can roll over and sink. Meet Captain Francesco Schettino. On the night of January 13th, 2012, he steered the Costa Concordia in close to an Italian island to show off a sail-by salute for people on shore. He cut it too close. The ship struck a rock and tore a gash 50 meters long down the hull. There were 4,252 people on board. The ship rolled onto its side. 32 of them died. And Schettino? He climbed into a lifeboat and left, while some 300 people were still trapped on the ship. The press christened him Captain Coward. He got 16 years in prison. But here's the gut punch for an owner. The ship cost about $570 million to build. Pulling the wreck back up became the most expensive salvage operation in history. Over $1 billion. More than 3 times what the ship cost in the first place. And the corporate fine the parent company paid for all of it? About 1 million euros. Now scale that disaster up to the entire industry, all at once. March 2020, every cruise ship on the planet stops. At the same time, zero revenue coming in and full costs going out. The ships burn cash by the hundreds of millions a month just sitting still in the water. Carnival raised over $10 billion in emergency loans in a matter of months just to stay alive. And the industry took on tens of billions in new debt that it's still carrying today. The most reliable revenue machine in travel was one pandemic away from zero. No other business goes from completely full to completely off overnight. And if you think all of this is ancient history, let me bring you right up to today. Illness outbreaks on cruise ships hit a record high in 2025, with norovirus regularly knocking out dozens, sometimes hundreds of passengers on a single sailing. And it's not slowing down. A record 19 million Americans cruised in 2024, and that's climbing toward nearly 22 million this year. Then there's the darker stat the lines don't advertise. Since 2017, there have been 187 people who went overboard, most of them tied to alcohol. So many that ships now bolt thermal cameras to the railings to catch the falls. Every one of those headlines is a lawsuit, a refund, and a crack in the only thing you're really selling. The fantasy that nothing can go wrong out there. So with all those guaranteed crowds and all that captive spending, how does a cruise empire actually go bankrupt? It almost always comes down to one or two mistakes. Mistake 1, too much debt at exactly the wrong moment. These empires are built on borrowed billions, and the debt does not care if there's a recession, a war, or a virus. Sign for a fleet at the top of the market on payments that assume your ships are full forever. And then 2020 walks in and reminds you that no cruise line is full forever. Mistake 2, building the wrong ship for the wrong crowd. Too fancy for budget cruisers, too cramped for the luxury set, or aimed at customers who simply never show up. And remember, those enormous fixed costs do not shrink to fit a half-empty ship. Match the boat to the buyer, or the buyer never comes. So let's step back and look at what this business actually is, because it's not what's on the brochure. A modern cruise isn't really transportation. It's barely even a boat trip. Only about a third of the money even comes from taking you somewhere. It's a floating shopping mall with a casino, a hotel, and a captive audience. And the voyage is just the delivery mechanism. It's the thing that traps the customer next to the cash registers for an entire week in the middle of the sea with no way off. And the smartest operators figured out the final move. Why stop at owning the mall when you can own the destination too? Royal Caribbean took a Bahamian island it had leased since 1988, poured $250 million into it, and turned it into a private resort with 14 water slides that only its own passengers are allowed to set foot on. And here's the genius. Because the cruise line owns the port, it pays no docking fees and no local taxes to stop there. Revenue from that one island jumped 43%. Carnival is now copying the exact playbook with a $600 million island of its own. The end game was never just owning ships. It's owning the ship, the casino, the mall, and the island they all sail to. You collect the rent on every part of the trip. So let's do what we came here to do. If you get this right, how much do you make? Optimistic scenario. Your ship sail full at 105%. You're pulling roughly $300 of profit out of every passenger, every week. You're operating inside an oligopoly where just 3 companies control over 75% of the world's cruise beds with 22 million Americans climbing aboard this year. Get it right, and you compound into one of the most resilient cash machines in all of travel. Realistic scenario: a virus, a wreck, a recession, or a debt payment lands while your ships are sitting idle, and that $2 billion asset flips into a $2 billion liability overnight. The difference between a great year and a catastrophic one is one bad headline. So here's the one rule to remember if you ever decide to buy a cruise line. Out there on the open ocean, the sea never makes anyone rich. The 5,000 people trapped on board with nothing to do but spend, they do. So don't buy a boat. Buy the mall that floats, and make sure you own the island it sails to.